Hello everyone, and this video will be devoted to the moment of how a sewing machine works in general. And why are we talking to you about this? Because if you do not understand the fundamental points, how and due to what a stitch is formed, how the elements of a sewing machine work in general, it will be very problematic for you to adjust it. So, before you start adjusting your machine, I recommend watching the entire video carefully, although the beginning will be using the example of a machine with a vertical shuttle. A little later, a horizontal shuttle will be considered, and it is important for you to simply understand the general principle of operation, how everything works. Only in this case can you understand the pattern of the location of the needle, shuttle device, toothed rack, and so on. So, we will now consider the main point using the example of a machine with a vertical shuttle. Here I managed to find an animation on YouTube. Also a good interesting resource came across. So, what I want to draw your attention to right away. Look, the needle plate. Here it is, the needle at the top, the toothed feed dog, here it is at the bottom, the foot. The bobbin case, and, by and large, the stitch is formed in the fabric between this needle plate and the foot. This is what you need to understand. In addition, we have the needle thread at the top, the bobbin thread at the bottom. Why do we dwell on such moments? It often happens that when you try to adjust the stitch itself, you do not quite understand what needs to be turned. This video clearly shows that if the stitch loops on the wrong side, this is often the problem with the needle thread. If the loops are pulled out on the face, then this is already a problem with the lower thread or the so-called bobbin case. Why are we talking about this? I have already made a video about adjusting the lower thread, upper thread. If your bobbin case is incorrectly adjusted or the upper thread is blocked in some way, you will not get a normal, high-quality stitch. That is, it is very important for you to understand this technical point, because in essence, understanding how the upper thread goes, how the lower thread goes, will help you understand what to adjust and how to adjust. Well, let's move on. So, pay attention, the needle is going to puncture. In this case, this is just the bottom point. The bottom point is touched by the shuttle device. Someone calls it a grid. But what I want to draw your attention to, this gap is essential here. The gap between the needle itself and the gap between the shuttle nose. Specifically, there are master classes where I will show, for example, where and what, how to do it. This is one of the starting points. Besides, running a little ahead, I will say that often what happens with the machine is that either this gap increases, or the synchronization is disrupted, that is, the needle eventually goes up or the shuttle enters late and then it simply does not remove the loop. In this case, it turns out that the machine does not grab the upper thread. If this is exactly what happens to you, then in fact the master class considers exactly this situation when the machine does not sew. And you need to adjust it. Well, let's go further. That is, here it is, the cycle itself is going, the shuttle device has captured, it reaches the bottom point due to the pusher. That is, here it works, the mesh itself, and what happens to us next, the upper thread is pulled up, it forms. The loop or weave is moved by a rack and the cycle is repeated. What I want to draw attention to is, well, a machine is a very complex device, this cycle. It is repeated constantly, and pay attention to the moment. The shuttle device is at the bottom point, the loop begins to drop, but here the author has shown the so-called heel well. Here, if you look closely or open your spring, well, like your machine, there is a spring, so-called, and this shuttle device, it has a small lux. And what's the catch here? When you adjust the machine yourself, then depending on how the shuttle itself is dropped, the moment is also fundamental. Or you set up early triggering and then the upper thread will break, or set up late triggering. And this upper thread will rest against the heel of the so-called pusher. I also looked at these moments in the buns, what happens with seams. This video is freely available. Well, take a look. This is the moment I wanted to draw attention to, because this nuance is fundamentally important. Because here, further, we see, it slipped. That is, here it is, the spring is going. And now pay attention, the shuttle device has captured, dropped, because here a gap is formed. Next, what I want to draw attention to. Often in sewing machines that have a zigzag, the needle is not stationary, and at the time of the zigzag it goes in the extreme right position and in the extreme left. It happens that on some fabrics the machine begins to skip on a wide zigzag and this is already the first bell for you regarding the fact that, in fact, the machine is already starting to become unbalanced or out of adjustment because, as a rule, this begins to be observed on thin fabrics. Also on knitted fabrics, on elastic ones, and the icing on the cake is when the machine stops sewing even in the middle position on a straight line. That is, this is your starting point. If the machine starts working incorrectly, then it is time to adjust it. Further on this slide, the moment is shown that the axis on which the shuttle device is located rotates. In this case, this is the bobbin case. I also noticed this in one of the videos, why this unit needs to be lubricated. Because, unfortunately, the bobbin case wears out here and can lead to the result that either it will not be fixed on this clasp, or it simply will not snap, or it can simply jump out during sewing. This is also such a fundamental point that we need to pay attention to. Next, here we are shown the moment of resetting itself, which is essentially what I was talking about. That is, pay attention. This nuance is also very well and in detail described in the goodies. But now I draw your attention, and the purpose of this video in general is for you to understand what depends on what. And we also see that the bobbin case itself plays a little back and forth. It is what creates the noise. The machine, figuratively speaking, knocks a little. Well, here too is a fundamental point. The machine is synchronized, and what happens? When we pay attention to this moment. I will most likely place links to this video in the description of the video. Or we will now run this cycle itself. What I would like to draw attention to specifically here on this slide. When the needle catches, here it is reset, and after the thread is reset, we see the thread is pulled up by the device. Here, too, such a technical moment is very important. As a rule, this very rarely fails, but it still happens when this crank mechanism gets knocked down. In addition, here the author also shows an interesting moment, and I also emphasized this moment in my master classes, what I would like to draw attention to. Pay attention to the fact that what is the main algorithm? The needle enters, the toothed rack together with the needle entrance goes down. And only when the needle comes out, the fabric moves forward. Practice shows that, depending on the type of machine, this synchronization mechanism can also fail. Therefore, we also pay attention to this. You see how exactly the process itself happens. But now we will start the machine itself and again, and you will see how the cycle generally happens. So, the needle enters, is caught by the hook of the shuttle nose, dropped. Then pulled up from above, the thread goes around the shuttle and comes out. Now the same cycle is repeated again. In this case, there is a pusher with a spring. It makes reciprocating movements. There is a small gap here through which the thread is dropped and captured. I will also make a separate video about these shuttle devices. Here, too, there are some such nuances that are fundamental. It is also important for you to understand that the bobbin case is actually fixed. Therefore, by and large, here is the main starting point in adjusting machines with a vertical shuttle. It is easy to set it up correctly. Well, then comes the main principle of the so-called thread take-up. It is triggered when the thread is dropped from the shuttle device. This is also important for you to understand. Well, the moment itself, when the fabric moves, that is, the needle has entered, the loop has formed and then the fabric is advanced. That is, the conveyor is triggered with some delay. Next, we will move on to the features of a machine with a horizontal shuttle. Specifically, the horizontal shuttle is taken from the Discovery Channel browser machine, and so let's pay attention to when the thread is threaded, the thread passes through the needle. Next, here is the eye. Needles or points are the same. A fundamental point since it has some design features. Therefore it is very important to thread the needle correctly. Then here is the needle hole through which the thread itself passes, the toothed rack. Here, the principle of loop formation is slightly different. In this case, here is the plastic shuttle. A separate video will also be devoted to it. The spool is simply placed in it and threaded correctly. And in this shuttle device, in fact, here is the bottom of the tension regulator. Now let's pay attention to this too. A little later it will be shown how it all works in this case. The teeth are simply removed here and here is the insert itself. Here is the shuttle. What is it? Circular motion, here it passes, the lower thread, and let's pay attention to this. There is a slightly different principle of loop formation, that is, the needle goes to the bottom point. Now it is captured by the nose of the shuttle, the needle went up. That is, now the thread will be thrown around this shuttle device. Here it is, the lower thread, which is under tension with the spool. And the fundamental point is that this spool is wound correctly. And it is also inserted correctly. There is a separate video. I will also place links in the description on how to thread it in general and what is the peculiarity, but pay attention to the fact that here the upper thread touches this protrusion. Just this nuance will play a role because when the shuttle device jams, it turns it inside out, rotates, here jagged places begin, which, let's say, interfere with the thread flow, and also from below. But this was also described in detail in the video. But now I want to show you the general meaning and the general essence of the work. Here the thread fits further. Here, pay attention, it passed here. Here is the installation finger or stop. I also emphasized this. Depending on the gap here, the thread can either loop on top. This is precisely the design and fundamental difference between a horizontal and vertical stocking machine. There are simply slightly different settings for each type of machine. And then the thread is dropped and a loop is formed. That is, there is a slightly different principle of loop formation in the machine. Toothed rack. The toothed rack works on the same principle. When the needle goes in, the toothed rack goes down. When the needle comes out and a loop is formed, only then does the machine begin to advance the fabric. Well, here, further, is what I would like to draw attention to. In general, in principle, the machine itself is a very complex mechanism, a lot of reciprocating movements per minute. It's all synchronized, the needle, shuttle device, teeth, foot. Specifically, different machines have different principles, but in this case, for example, the main shaft is driven by motors, the needle bar goes through the crank mechanism. Then it synchronizes, transmits the shuttle device drive along the shaft. It is also synchronized with the feed of the toothed rack. And here, too, there are design features. Depending on the model, these technological units are implemented differently in different companies, but now you see just the principle of loop formation. It is simply important for you to understand. How is a loop formed? How does the weaving work in general? If you don't understand this principle, it will be very difficult to regulate the machine at all. You won't understand why you need to do certain manipulations. So, this is how the machine works. The shuttle needle is synchronized. Also the toothed rack. These 3 points are fundamentally important. And depending on the machine, there are some specific technological points and everything else. So, now we will start the video again and I will show you some of the nuances. Such a brief overview. So, the upper thread goes. The upper thread passes through the needle. In this case, here is the eye of the needle and the fundamental point is which side the needle is threaded. The needle passes through the needle plate and again, we will repeat that a little earlier it was shown that the seam is formed between the foot and the needle plate. The holes in the needle plate play a role here. Next, here is the mechanism itself, which you can see how it works in general. The spool is placed on top. Here is the insert, which is simply installed and fixed due to this mounting pin. The shuttle itself on horizontal machines, it is a slightly different design. But the main principle in household machines is exactly this. Now the thread is captured by the nose of the shuttle. And we will stop here for a moment, because although this stable needle is shown, in some machines the needle also plays. This spread is equal to the width of the zigzag. In some machines it is 4 mm, in some machines 7 mm. And it is important to set not only this gap so that the loop is dropped correctly, but also so that in extreme positions the machine works correctly, without skipping stitches. Also, again, it's the same principle here. Since the shuttle is fixed here, what happens to the machines at this point? Well, as a rule, over time, the needle bar simply goes up. This is one of the moments. And there are also certain reference points, which I talk about in the master class on specific machines, how to properly adjust this synchronization so that the loop is removed. Because, unfortunately, in some machines there are such nuances, there are such moments when problems begin with incorrect adjustment. In addition, now we are looking at the shuttle device unit. A separate video is dedicated to it on malfunctions, why it jams and so on, because it even happens that the machine is normally adjusted, but due to this bastard, well, you can't call it anything else, due to this stop. And some design changes, the machine with a horizontal shuttle simply does not so. And knowing all these points, you can basically do it, adjust it yourself. Now I would like to draw your attention to something. Here is a disassembled machine. And if we go back to the previous video and to this video, now that the machine is disassembled, will you be able to determine what brand it is? I don't think so. Now you can see a little bit that this video is based on the Discovery channel. Using Discovery as an example, the browser machine is disassembled here. But I would like to draw your attention to something. Here is the basic principle. It is applicable to almost all machines with a horizontal shuttle. There is a belt drive here. Structurally, many machines have other components instead of a belt drive. But the essence does not change, and my goal is to show you the design differences between some companies and some models. Because understanding the general principle and understanding these design differences, it will be easier for you to adjust this or that model. In this case, this video shows that although the basic principle is the same, there are basically three main elements that are important for adjustment. First of all, now it's the needle, the second thing is the shuttle, the third thing is the teeth, depending on what's going on with the machine. In fact, in the master classes, we set up exactly this synchronization, that is, the synchronization of the needle, synchronization of the shuttle device and synchronization of the foot, because practice shows that this is what breaks down in 90% of cases. Well, in addition to the fact that most master classes are paid, there are also a lot of free videos that show certain points. Therefore, I recommend that you find and watch. These videos are on my channel. If you don't understand something, you can write in the comments under the video. It is possible that if you like these videos, I will additionally shoot some more technical nuances. Again, I repeat, the purpose of this video was to show how a line is generally formed on machines with a horizontal shuttle, on machines with a vertical shuttle. Let's summarize some thoughts. We regulate 3 points. Specifically, the needle bar, the movement of the shuttle device of the shuttle and also the movement of the rack are shown here. As a rule, at home all this is enough. And it is important for you to understand that you are not tied to any particular company, to any particular model. Because the principle that is embedded in a machine with a horizontal shuttle, machines with a vertical shuttle are the same. The only difference is in the design of the movement of the toothed rack, in the movement of the shuttle device, in the movement of the needle bar, and specific points how this gap is adjusted, how the height of the needle entry is adjusted, control points for synchronizing the passage of the needle, the night device and the rack. Because, by and large, practice shows that this fails over time. Therefore, when we talk about the fact that the machine does not so, it simply turns out that the synchronization is broken. Either the needle bar was moving, or the shuttle was knocked down, or the movement of the needle relative to the rack was disrupted, because believe me, anything can happen in practice. And understanding how the mechanism should work in general, how the loop is formed, will help you repair your sewing machine. So let's summarize. The main goal of the master classes is to help you independently adjust this complex device. I will not go into detail in these master classes on how and what to do, but it is important for you to understand that, in principle, all this is available to you if you repeat after me step by step. In 95% of cases you will be able to solve the issue. Before looking at which master class to buy, it is important for you to understand that there are certain design features. If you have doubts about some points, before purchasing this or that master class, contact me, and I will be able to say for sure whether this master class is suitable for your specific model. Because again, the same browsers have their own nuances. The same machines with a horizontal shuttle, some browser models have their own design features and adjustments. Some videos are applicable to some models, some to other models. Each model has certain, so to speak, rakes, characteristic faults that are most widespread and most often encountered. Therefore, in each specific master class, I will consider the most characteristic faults that occur specifically for this type of mechanics. And again, we will consider 3 points: synchronization of the movement of the needle, toothed rack, shuttle device, control points that are important for us to set so that we do not have gaps. Well, I will also share life hacks, some other points that relate to certain nuances with machines. Therefore, I think that you will not be disappointed. Regarding the warranty and everything else, this will be written on the corresponding page on my website. If something is not clear, you can write to me in the comments, or on the website, or under this video. I will be happy to try to answer your questions. And I want to tell you that yes, there are certain secrets, yes, there are certain nuances, but you can set up the machine yourself. In most cases, so that it works, it is clear that if something breaks, something happens globally. Well, here you can't do without a mechanic or a service center. But in 95% of cases, you can do it yourself. Who will repair? If you are friends with a screwdriver, you can do it yourself. Often, according to statistics, more women who have husbands watch. You can just ask your other half to step by step, together with me adjust. Just in the master classes I will show how to do it. And with the minimum necessary number of tools, in principle, you can do it yourself because you need a flat screwdriver, you need a Phillips screwdriver, you need a set of Allen keys. Maybe you will need an awl. And in general, this will be enough. That's all. And until new videos.